Effective Oral Presentation Skills, Chapter 7. This is probably one of the most important things any business person learns how to do, and that's to give an effective oral presentation. You're going to be doing them in small groups, dyads, one-on-one. You'll be doing them in large groups, and it's something that will be continual throughout your career. As you advance, you might end up actually giving them in front of boards of directors or giving them to bankers. It just depends on your field. But one thing you can plan on is that you will always be giving oral presentations. And one of the things we've become very dependent upon is PowerPoints or Prezis. And you can use either of them. They should be your notes. They should be your speaking points. They should not, the slides shouldn't be filled with paragraphs of material. And you need to take those notes and expand upon them, is one of the main things I want you to get from this chapter. And then we'll also look at a lot of other things that have to do with oral presentations. So hopefully you'll learn something new. The learning objectives for this chapter: describe effective oral presentations using the communication process. We're going to look at a little subset of the communication process as oral communication affects it. Explain the main elements of effective oral presentation skills. List the 3 parts for speech and the functions for each. Express the proper emotional meaning and presentation content. Suggestions for overcoming the dangers of vocal and nonverbal delivery, which are pretty common for most of us. We all fall into it sometimes. Learn the proper way to use graphics in a presentation, and learn how to identify figures of speech that were used in great speeches and how those made those great speeches. As you look at the communication process of an effective oral presentation, you have the main thing, your audience. You're trying to leave your audience with some main ideas, things that you want them to take away and remember. And as a manager, you're going to send a message. You're going to have a presentation occasion. It could be positive. It could be a negative occasion. And what you want to do is you want to see if that message meets its objective. Does it achieve its purpose? Does the audience actually remember what you said? And then you want to know what the audience's reaction is to your message. So do you need to change your message, or do you need to add to your message? But it is a circular form with lots of feedback, hopefully, if it's done correctly. The elements of an effective presentation. You have your purpose, and your purpose is one of 3 things. You're either trying to persuade someone to do something, you're trying to inform them of information they may need to do their job, or you're trying to entertain them. Under persuasion, it's something you have to believe in, and it has to be something that they can act upon, that they can do. When you inform someone, it can be a very simple narrative type of form. It can be descriptive, where it's very objective, or it can be explanatory in nature, where you're explaining the way something's going to happen. And then the last one is entertainment or gratification. And this is simply when you're telling someone something that is for entertainment purposes only, such as after-dinner speeches, popular lectures, these kinds of things. How you choose to deliver the presentation has to do with your audience. You can memorize a presentation. All of us at some point in our education have had to memorize verses, parts of scripts, something of this nature. Memorization is very good when it's something short and something that you want to stay on task. A manuscript type of presentation is good politically. It is good when you want to follow a script. TV people follow manuscripts all the time. It's a write and read type of presentation where you want to stay very much on a script. You may have a time limitation, but basically you're going to stay on a very limited script. You're not going to get outside of it. Impromptu is what you do in class all the time. It's where you ask spontaneous questions. So an impromptu is generally not as focused or prepared as some of the others. Extemporaneous is what we normally do in a presentation. It is planned. We have slides. We have note cards. We go through them. However, people can ask questions. So people can interfere with the process. So we may get off track and then come back on track. Extemporaneous is the most popular kind of business presentation. And then delivery. Basically, in most business presentations, you're not going to want to read it, which means practice what you want to say. Have notes, but the notes should be minimal. In fact, basically, if you're using Prezi or you're using PowerPoint, that should be your notes. At some point when you're giving a presentation, have someone videotape you. There is nothing more effective on improving your presentation skills than watching yourself. We are always more critical of ourselves than anyone else can possibly be of us. There are basically 3 parts to a speech, very much like writing an essay. There's an introduction, where you tell them what you're going to talk about. There's a body, where you tell them the information that you probably want them to go away with. And there's a conclusion, where in a very short form, you tell them what you've already told them. These are very important functions. And depending on how long your presentation is, will depend on how much time you spend. But basically, a presentation is like a book chapter, an essay, or anything else. You basically are working off of an outline, and all the parts should be complete. Emotions in a presentation are important. People want to feel that you believe what you're talking about, and they can tell if you're excited or if you're not excited about your topic. And basically, people will remember things better if you can put it in such a way as that they can emotionally get attached to what you're talking about. So having a little excitement in your voice is a very good thing. If you are a humdrum talker, you're one of those people who are talking in a monotone and you just completely, this is this, this is that, you're probably going to lose people very quickly. And the other thing people are looking for is honesty, sincerity. Just how honest are you in what you're saying? And the more honest they feel you are, the more they're going to be persuaded to whatever you're talking about. Suggestions for vocal and nonverbal delivery. It's very interesting. These 2 people were almost 16 years apart, Bender and Detz. And they have 12 tips on making powerful presentations. In 1991, we basically were just starting to use PowerPoint type presentations, and most of them had to be made professionally. You couldn't make them yourself. By 2007, Prezi and PowerPoint are very much a part of our life. So let's go through and look at what they have. First one for Bender is touch the audience's emotion. First one for Dietz is focus your topic. You need to move the audience to action. And that's pretty much the same as analyze your audience. You've got to know who your audience is before you can persuade them to do anything. Use familiar language to build rapport and trust. Basically, that's what we were talking about when we said you don't want to use a lot of slang. You want to make sure people are understanding you. Use shorter words and phrases. You can maintain an idea file if you give a lot of presentations so that you have things that you can pull out. Organize your material. Use simple language. It's saying the same thing. Give your speech some style. Let your personality come out. It's very important. Always keep your structure as simple as possible. And while humor does not work in multicultural groups very well, if you have a small group that you know everyone very well, humor can be very, very useful. Make the audience your participants. Basically, get them involved. Try and get them to give you feedback. It's very important. Practice your delivery. The more you practice, the more you videotape yourself and watch yourself, the better your presentations will be over time. Use unusual statistics or something that's going to catch their attention, that's going to pull them in. And make sure your body language reinforces your words. Remember, the nonverbal is always believed before the verbal. And in certain situations, that can be as high as 90%, that the nonverbal is more important than what is said, what is verbalized. Mix up your presentation. Show a short video or use an overhead transparency. Use something different. Vary your voice. Definitely do not do that humdrum talking. Get good media coverage. Basically, if this is something you want broadcast, you can think about YouTube. You can think about a lot of different things today that are out there. You can use a Twitter or a blog. And then if you're asked to speak, make sure it's a speaking engagement where you are going to be beneficial, where you feel good about doing the presentation. There are many different types of intelligences, and Gardner basically has an entire list of them if you go to his book. Goleman was one of the first people who made emotional intelligence one of the actual intelligence that we now look at. And when we say an intelligence, this is something that you're, to a point, born with. Some of the intelligence you can improve through education. Emotional intelligence is one of those, though it's not one that necessarily everyone can improve. But in emotional intelligence, basically, you are controlling your emotions such that you're able to listen to other people's verbals and nonverbals and use those to persuade the other person to believe whatever it is you want to get across. And there are 5 domains in emotional intelligence. First one is knowing your own emotions and being able to manage those emotions. And then motivating yourself, and then recognizing emotions in others and being able to use that to persuade them to believe the way you want to. And in other words, you're handling the relationship. Emotional intelligence is very good, particularly for people who are in sales or managers. Because one of the things managers have to do is control or get others to believe in what they're doing. There are a number of things that can go wrong in a speech situation. Probably the worst one is not being prepared. You owe it to your audience to be prepared, or there's no reason to get up there to begin with. Make sure the topic is one that's appropriate for the audience. It's something that they're interested in. Break any nervous habits you might have, and this is where recording yourself is very helpful. Listen to yourself. Do you have a lot of ums and uhs and things like this? Learn to pause. Give people an opportunity to catch up with you. And watch your audience. Are they with you or are they off doing something else? And if they really care about this topic, you need to really worry about this. If it's a captive audience, like a classroom, they may not really be interested in what you're saying, and that may be why they're off somewhere else. And make eye contact. Eye contact in our culture is very important. Look across the room. Don't just look at one person. Look across the room. If this bothers you, start by looking at their forehead. They will not be able to tell the difference if you're looking at their forehead or their eyes. But it's close enough that it will pull them in. And this is very, very important. But any bad habits you have, you want to break. if you talk too much with your hands. That could be one of the things that you want to watch for. In this chapter, we have a number of speeches. Read through these speeches and look at what makes them very good speeches and why they have lasted the test of time. Why, in many cases, they're still speeches we're hearing today. Let's look at some of the problems that people have when they give presentations. The first one is underestimating the importance of public speaking to your career. And this is even worse at this particular point in history because people are talking less. They're using technology more. So in many cases, they don't have experience talking face-to-face with people. Winging important speeches or media interviews. You need to prepare. Make sure that you know what's going to happen, or you'll end up like President Obama's press secretary using the word unfettered 6 times in a 5-minute speech. Leave it all to the speechwriters is a mistake. Basically, if you have a speechwriter, go through the speech and make it yours. It's very, very important. When you're giving a speech, people expect to be able to ask questions, and they expect to have those questions answered. Another reason for preparing. Don't forget who your audience is. You don't want to talk down to them. You don't want to talk up to them. You want to talk at their level. Make sure you have answers to questions. Very important. And also, if you don't have an answer, know when you need to admit you don't have an answer and tell them you'll find an answer. And if you are in a group of people that are very similar, you can use some humor. But if you're in a multicultural group, a gender mixed group, you may want to leave the humor home. Some things you can do to overcome missteps. Speak at every opportunity. While you're in school is an excellent time to give presentations. Practice there. They're your best audience. Talk about big ideas rather than getting to nitty-gritty. Tell stories so that you can pull people in. Connect to things in their history. Respect the audience. The audience has a knowledge, and you need to have a pretty good idea of what their wisdom and their knowledge already is. And tell them something they do not know. Even if you're repeating information that they should be familiar with, add something new and polish your presence. Be dressed properly, proper hygiene, look the part of a leader. Graphics are very important. They can basically make a picture from words. And when you're dealing in multicultural groups, particularly where there's language difficulties, graphics can be particularly important. One of the things that's very bad about graphics is it's very easy to make them incorrectly so that they're not proportional, and basically they're not telling a true story. They're lying. But they are very helpful to help an audience understand what is being said. A few things about graphics that are general to all graphics. There's a lot of people who have color blindness. You should never have red, blue, and green touching each other. And unfortunately, if you're using Microsoft, these colors come up quite often together. So you need to go in and know how to change the colors. Electronic presentations, you have 2 right now. You have PowerPoint and Prezi. One of the things I would say about Prezi, if you're going to use it, I think it's a wonderful media, but don't get too many things going on. We actually had someone at an Association for Business Communication who gave a presentation about Prezi and what you could do in Prezi. They had so many things moving around that people actually left the presentation sick to their stomach. Non-technical, and don't forget the non-technical graphic that you have out there. Flip charts, chalkboards, transparencies. There are other things that you can use that are very, very useful. Let's look at pie charts. One of the things pie charts should always do is they should show a complete whole, 100%. They should go from largest to smallest, starting at noon. And you should be able to understand the pie chart all on its own. So it should be labeled very, very clearly. Colors are very important because you definitely have them touching here. And you don't want to use, for any kind of chart, you don't want to have any 3-dimension. If you had 3-dimension on this particular pie chart, you'd make that first quarter look even bigger than it is, and the third and fourth quarters smaller than they are. So it's very important to keep your proportions correct. You don't want your circle looking like an egg. Bar charts are used very often. And one of the things that's very nice to do with bar charts is to actually put numbers on the end, because, and we did it with some of them and we didn't do it with all of them in this one, but what it shows you is you're not guessing exactly what the number is. You can see exactly what it is. So always make sure and do that. Make sure that you have a heading, that you have the 2 axes labeled well, and make sure your axes are proportional so that everything is kept looking like it should, and that you're not making the data look either less different or more different than it really should look or appear. Line graphs are one of the most abused graphs. In here you have red, blue, and green together. The only time it would be a problem is when they actually cross. But line graphs should always be used over time. One of the axes should be time. And in this case, the x-axis is time. Now you have thousands of tons of soybeans, wheat, and corn. And you can see how they came in over time. Good use of a line chart. One of the things you don't want is you don't want the line chart running off the bottom or off the top of the graph. Always make sure you have a little blank space at both ends. This is an example of an area chart where you just fill in everything below the points. Some people like these. I'm not a particular proponent of them, but just make sure that you label them well and that they don't cover each other up to the point you're losing information. Pictograms, sometimes people will misstate as bar graphs or pie charts, that anytime you have pictures involved, it'll be a pictogram, and you can make them look like bar charts, line charts, pie graphs. You can use it for any of them. So again, it's important that whatever you use be somewhat proportional, so that as you have these little figures going up, that they go up equally. If you notice here, the peanut butter, the gingerbread man, and the little star sugar cookie are all approximately the same size. That's one of the important things you want to do. And again, make sure everything is labeled well. Tables are good when you need exact amounts. And I would always suggest that you use a table when you do want exact amounts, so that it's easy to compare them. Figures of speech are used in many famous speeches. And these are things that you may want to consider in your own speeches that you give, particularly when you're trying to persuade people. An antithesis is a contrasting of words when something is placed at the beginning and end of a single sentence or clause. And it's a contrast between those words. Personification is something that takes on a personal form. It could be a dog who's personified as a person. It could be a character who's personified as a person. It can be a representation of a thing or an abstraction of a person. But it's giving something the attributes of a person. Interrogation, rhetorical questions, they're not intended to be answered directly, but they are intended to get the receiver to think about what is being said and to possibly conjure up answers in their own mind. A syncodoche is a part for a whole, or a whole for a part. It's where you take something and you're only going to use part of it to make a point. A tautology is a repetition of the same word. And sometimes this can be used successfully. Sometimes you might use it too much in too short of a time span. So you always want to make sure you use these very, very carefully. There is an example of a speech at the end of your chapter, and I would suggest you look through this to become more familiar with how these have been used throughout history and will continue to be used by people. And when they don't use them, some of the problems they run into.